cold. I can't drink now till I try. Maybe I'll scrape something from the floor.
G'day, hi and welcome. Let's just jump into this. Alright, so got another little video for you here. I hope you guys got a kick out of that little intro I did that was called, it's a Teresa song called In the Courtyard of Lies Leaf. It's a really crazy song. If you've never seen Teresa's, they're this Finnish metal band that basically put on like Viking costumes and stuff like that. And they got like war makeup on and stuff like that, and they're really good. It's a hilarious song. Although whatever he sings at the halfway time of the song, he's singing in Finnish, and I would love to get a translation of what he's singing, but I kind of get the idea because he's like staggering around the stage with a whiskey bottle and whatever, and it looks like whatever he's saying is really funny. So I just kind of came up with my own lyrics for it. But there was a jam night that I did, and it was a crazy night. It was really fun. And the guy named Jamie on the drums, I'd never met him before. He just jumped on the drums, and I decided to liven up the night with this kind of really funny drinking song. And the people really got a kick out of it. They were laughing their asses off. So it kind of brings me to the topic of stage presence and how to make your stage performance better. Obviously, that probably wasn't the best song I've ever played, and poor guy on the drums was like, "What is this maniac doing?" But he covered it quite well. Like he was just like, after he goes, "I didn't know what to do." He says, "I just figured, okay, I'll just bash the drums and that'll do the job." And it did, you know. But everybody got a kick out of it. That was the point. It was funny. So. It was a fun night, but for some people, you know, they have a hard time with being on stage and stage presence and stuff like that. And if we take a look around the world right now and look at like rock stars and musicians in general, you know, even actors and actresses, you could throw the whole lot in there. Sometimes, you know, like they do stuff to be like edgy and stand out and whatever, and sometimes they pull it off really well, and then other times it's just so cringe, right? So there is a fine line between doing things on stage that is really cool or unique or whatever, and doing things that are just going to be like, what were you thinking? You know what I mean? And I've recently seen some performances by some extremely popular stars, and I'm just like, what were they thinking? You know, like that footage is not going to age well. You know what I mean? Like it was just, without getting into too graphic detail, you know, whatever, but like one was a girl peeing on a member of the audience. That like there was that, like, you can't even make this up. The other one is the singer being puked on by somebody. It's like this one being the most recent, so you probably know who I'm talking about. And I'm just like, why would you even do that? Like what? Like, you know what I mean? Like what edginess level that do you have to get to, you know, to make that cool? You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't work. So something that was cool, maybe something I would never do, but Jimi Hendrix, for example, lighting his guitar on fire and smashing it. Okay, at Woodstock. Okay, yeah, he sacrificed the guitar there. that was really cool for the time. Would you want to? Pete Townsend used to do it all the time, but they could afford to do it. Although I was always of the belief that I'd rather you just toss the guitar into the audience and give it to somebody rather than bust it. But I also saw, when I saw Motley Crue, Nicky Sixx did it with his bass, and he smashed it up and he threw it in the audience. But then I started looking at it. It's like, you got a guitar neck or a bass neck busted there, and there's like a, people fighting over this. Somebody could severely get hurt with the, like a pointy guitar, broken guitar neck. I mean, that the edge of that thing is like a freaking dagger. You know what I mean? So maybe it's not a good idea to throw your guitars in the audience. But I hate to see a good guitar smashed, especially when there's so many people that have shitty equipment they can't afford to upgrade, and you see some rock star just smashing like a $30,000 guitar just for fun. But again, I guess who am I to judge? Maybe if I had $30,000, got paid $10,000 a night or whatever, you might do it once in a while, right? Who knows? I don't know. I don't think I would. It's not in me to do that, right? But like Jimi Hendrix, he would play the guitar behind his neck, and put the pick in his teeth and start playing the guitar like that. I've done that on stage too. You should see the audience reaction when you play the guitar with your teeth. I mean, you could play it better than you'd possibly imagine. You're doing a lot of legato stuff, so it's mostly the left hand doing everything, but the parlor trick of it looks pretty cool. And then of course the Chuck Berry stuff with the duck walk across the stage, and then putting the guitar neck underneath your leg, playing behind your back and stuff like that. Steve Ray Vaughan used to do it. Chuck Berry used to do it a lot. And then you got like guys like Angus Young. He gets out there. That was the first concert I ever seen was AC/DC. And when Angus Young came out on the stage, like I've never seen a human being with so much energy. It's to the point where they bring out an oxygen bottle for the guy halfway through the show, just because he could it's bad enough that he's a smoker, but he's moving around so much, and like he does the leg kick and the little, that little hop that he does, but he's basically headbanging and rocking out with his SG to the point where like he nearly passes out. I'm sure he must have passed out quite a few times on stage, but like it gets to the point where he does a signal to the guy on the side of the stage. The guy runs out with an oxygen bottle and basically gives him a shot of O2 just to keep him going, so he doesn't faint. But the performance, right? It's what he's known for. Other people like Alice Cooper. I mean, you go and you see a theater, it's a stage show. I remember I saw White Lion, and the bass player and the singer, basically the bass player would kind of like tuck down and race towards the singer with his bass pointing at him like a spear, and Mike Tramp would run and like leapfrog over top of head on over the bass player, and they would do this a couple of times on stage. Dave Lee Roth with his like backflips and stuff like that. So I'm not saying you have to go that crazy with your stage performance, obviously, but how to engage the audience. Obviously, if you can see the little footage I put there, again, probably not the most engaging of audiences, but you could hear the people clearly were paying attention because you could hear the laughter. So they were engaged, right? When your audience is engaged with you, you get to entertain them. And then you ask yourself this question: if I was watching, myself in the audience, what would I want to see me do? You know what I mean? Like what experience would I want the audience to have? And this is where it gets tough for people. So I'm going to go like different levels. I know most videos like this usually always pander to the newbies, and stuff like that. And that's fine and dandy. So we'll talk about people that, okay, it's your first time playing live. Okay, your first time you're ever playing live, whether it's with a band or like acoustic, one-man band type thing, just you and your acoustic, male, female, doesn't matter here. The first time I ever played live, okay, I was a little nervous, I'm not going to lie to you, and I had my TCM Explorer and my first guitar. That was my second guitar. And I also had my backup guitar. My first guitar was a 1968 Harmony Rock. It looked like a Chuck Berry guitar. You've probably seen pictures in it in other videos. And what was interesting is we played on the back of a flatbed tow truck. on Canada Day with some high school friends and stuff like that, and we sucked big time. Like we were really bad. But what was bad was not because we were just so inexperienced. That was one part. The singer we had was so nervous. Number one, he was only able to look at his feet, and he couldn't. He basically couldn't sing. He had such stage fright, and that was the first song. And we had about 8 songs to do. And now the bass player and I were actually, we'd already been playing for a year or two each, so we were able to do the songs. But I made the biggest mistake a guitar player can make, or any band member can kind of make right off the bat, and that was I didn't check the tuning of my guitar, and it was a really hot day because it was July, right? And we're out in the sun, and I get on there and I hit the first chord, the very first song, and it was like a C chord or something like that, and it was so out. The G string was completely out. I could still hear the horrific sound of it. My mom was in the audience or whatever. You could see her just kind of cringing. But at the end of the song, I said, "Okay, guys, wait, I got a tune. So I tuned up, and it wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad. But we got through the 8 songs and whatever. And halfway through the 8 songs, another friend jumped up and he finished the songs for poor Kurt, who couldn't. He had so much stage fright he couldn't sing. But Mark and I, the bass player, and myself were doing well. And Steve, he was the drummer. Another guy I went to school with. His dad was a musician, so he was pretty good, like all things considering, for like a bunch of teenagers that really greenhorns, whatever. So our first gig was kind of like we got off. Oh man, we knew what we'd done wrong, whatever. But then we played again later that night, and we went back home. We practiced a little bit more. Steve's dad came in and said, "Okay, you guys, here's a couple of little tips for you." And whatever. And when we played, we still sucked that evening, but we played 10 times better, and just by changing a little bit of philosophy. So nervousness, after about the first, second song, me was always more hyperness than, more being excited than nervous, because I was, I'm a natural attention whore, so it doesn't really matter for me, like being in front of a big crowd. People, the bigger the crowd, the better for me, right? Because as a show off, I didn't have the talents to show off at that point. But we did not too bad the second time around that same evening, and like it was what it was, so it was what it was, and it was still fun, But we were able to sit there and analyze what we did and say, okay, well, next time we go on stage, let's do this instead of that, and all that stuff. And for some people, they never get out of that first stage fright. Some people don't have any stage fright or anything like that, and then suddenly they develop it. I've heard of that too, which is kind of strange. Like, it's one of those things that I guess everybody's different. So sometimes you can get a little bit nervous playing here, playing there, whatever. And I thought, okay, well, how does somebody overcome that? Well, the biggest thing I had to do, and I'm still really bad for this, is I play too fast live. I always play way too fast because I get hyper, right? So I've always told myself, count myself in. Like don't just start to get on the stage and you ready to go? Yeah, okay, go, and then just start the song. Stop for like a split second. Like it feels like when you get on stage, like for the first few times, it feels like you have to accomplish something really, like you got to hurry up and play. No, take your time, put on a performance. You're there to enjoy yourself, right? And if you enjoy yourself, the audience is going to enjoy themselves. But what you do is you get on stage, okay, and count yourself in 2, 3, 4, whatever the tempo is, so that you don't start off on a really high tempo. Because you see this a lot of times, even experienced people do this. They start off really fast, and then they start to slow down, and they speed up, they slow down, and they have a hard time, regulating their tempo, right? Especially when they get really hyper. And when you get hyper, you wind yourself especially if you're singing, right? So if you got to sing and play, and you play too fast, like you're going to wind your singer, and when they get winded, they get grumpy because like they can't hold the notes. They're singing till they almost pass out because they're singing too fast. So you got to learn how to breathe a bit on stage. So when The noobs, it's just going to be, you just got to go through it. You know what I mean? Get up there, go to a jam night, and I've watched a lot of people over the years at jam nights. Every time I go to a jam night, there's always, every other jam night where there's somebody, it's the very first time they've ever played live. And you can tell they're nervous and stuff like that. So the first thing, don't make any excuses on stage. Here's what I'm talking about. Sorry guys, I screwed up here. Like, when you screw up, you just keep playing. Do not point any attention to your screw ups, because it goes like this: the person gets on the stage, they've never played before, they're nervous, they start playing, and then they're like, sorry guys, I screwed up here, and they point attention to that they screw up, where if they were not to say anything at all, most people wouldn't notice. So even if you screw up, don't sweat it. It's not the end of the world. Just keep playing, right? And the other thing I notice is, especially with newbies and stuff like that, because they're kind of still stuck in their shell of the fear of, oh, I don't want to be too loud, I don't want to whatever. When you're singing in that mic, and I get accused of this all the time, and they're not wrong, is a lot of times I'm too far back from the mic. So you got to learn to step into the mic, and when you're singing, when you're thinking you're just a little bit too loud, you're probably just about right. I mean, trust me, if you're peaking the PA, you're gonna know. But a lot of times you're not singing loud enough and clear enough, right? So get on that mic. You'll see people in the audience sometimes, they'll gesture for you to get on the mic a bit, like move closer to the mic, and then because sometimes you forget too, right? So if you want the clarity and all that, you have to get on the mic. So don't be afraid of the microphone. Right? That's part of the job. Don't be afraid of the microphone. You got to get close to it. Yeah, it's always comfier to be like about a foot back and just sing and whatever. You can hear yourself fine probably, but the audience can't hear you. So get in on that mic. That's and focus on it. Now, for people that don't have microphones at home, one of the problems they have is that they don't know how to stay stationary on a mic, right? Especially acoustic players. Acoustic players are worse than anything, because acoustic players, you tend to move around because you're used to not having a cord on you. You're used to not being mic'd. You know what I mean? It's basically like the ultimate wireless system, right? But then when you're playing live, if you've got a cord on there, it's not so bad. But when you got to get singing near a microphone to stay stationary on that microphone, you have to kind of stay planted where you are, so that when you're singing, you're not wandering all over the stage kind of thing. Although that's really cool. Like, one thing I would love to have is a headset mic and a wireless system, because the show I'd be able to put on would be, I'd really be able to engage. I'm not saying I'd be jumping into the audience all the time, but I'd be at the edge of the stage, singing to the audience, a lot more engaged with the audience, right? But when you have to stay stationary, you got to be able to stay stationary at such that level where you're comfortable. And a lot of people either have the mic way too high or way too low or whatever. So take your time when you get on stage. Take your time setting the mic up. You have time. You're not going to take 20 minutes to set up. You don't need to. But just, get the height. I tend to, if you're like me and you tend to like to be able to glance down at your guitar during the solo parts and stuff like that. If you're just a strummer and you can play blindfolded the chords that you're going to play, then it doesn't matter as much. But for me, a lot of times I get on stage and the mic's set up for like too high, and it's like fine if you're just playing 3-chord stuff in the first position, but I need to be able to, like, I don't mind kind of like kind of like slouching down a bit with the mic a little bit lower, so that I could still see the fingerboard when I want to do some really quick licks on the guitar, for acoustic or whatever. For electric, it's not so much the same, because usually by the time you're doing the vocals while you're playing the electric, a lot of time you're just doing big bar chords, so it's not the same. But with the acoustic, I tend to like to have the mic lowered enough so that I can put my eyes on the fingerboard if I have to. So even if I have to kind of like hunch over like a gargoyle a bit over the mic, not to that extreme, but you get the idea. So being comfortable on stage is a big one. Make sure your guitar is super tuned, or your bass or whatever. As long as everything is tuned, that will take a lot of pressure off you if you know it's tuned, right? And tune your instrument. If you go to the bar, tune your instrument long before you go on stage, and just keep checking it. Because sometimes, like a guitar will just sit there, you just tuned it, and it'll just detune just because more people came in the bar and changed the temperature in the bar, right? Um, that happens too. So make sure your guitar is tuned the best you can, because that will take a lot of pressure off. The next thing, and this is whether you're really experienced or not, the one thing I would say that makes people so nervous on stage is how well do you know the song? And now this is something that you need to answer for yourself in such a manner that you're being honest with yourself. Can you play that song without missing a lyric? Can you play that song uh, basically? You don't practice it till you get it right. You practice it till you can't get it wrong. And a lot of times, people bring the songs out too early. And I've done this, and every time I do this, doesn't matter how. Like again, you're talking to a guy here, okay, probably not the most experienced player, but I've played hundreds of shows over the years. Like I'm 50 years old, so like with bands, I probably did about 275 shows just with one band over the years, and then other shows, whatever, and bars and like I say, bars and festivals and fairgrounds and whatever. Never played a wedding, never played a prom. Would be cool if I did, but I never did. Um, but I talked about that in the last video. But the one thing that was always didn't matter if it was a full band, a one-man band, whatever, if you do not know the material to the point where you can't get it wrong, that will become a subconscious thing to make you nervous. What if I forget a lyric? That's usually the big thing that comes up. What if I forget a lyric? What if I forget the guitar solo? What if I forget and when you pressure yourself with that, it kind of becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where you get instant amnesia when you get on stage, right? So I'll ask you that question again. Do you know the song so well that you can't get it wrong? And if the answer is I'm not sure, or maybe, or sort of, then that's not the answer. You should be able to say, yeah, I know that song so well. Like, if I screw up on stage, it's not because I don't know the song. You know what I mean? I mean, sometimes things, like brain farts happen. But you learn how to cover it. Improvisation is key here. Sometimes when you forget something, you take the song into a different direction, which is easy to do when you're a one-man band. But when you're a full band, it's like, like if you have to repeat the lyric, just cover it somehow, right? People will forgive you. I've seen people sing the same verse over 3 times in a row on a song that has 3 different verses, but nobody knows it because they don't draw attention to it. And then after, like, yeah, oops, I kind of forgot the lyrics on that one. But that's because you brought out the song. Either you haven't played it in a while or whatever. And the other thing is rehearse everything you're going to play, very well. And like in the morning, like if I'm going to be on a stage at the night, in the morning or whatever, I'll just run through whatever I'm going to do. Now if it's a full 3 hours set, you can't run through everything, but you run through it maybe the day before. You know what I mean? And leading up to that, like you get to know the set so well that it's just like you just play and play and play, and it doesn't stop. You know what I mean? And it becomes fluid. So that is the big one. Because the other thing you got to be able to say to yourself when you're on stage is, do I know my job? And what I mean by that is, again, the same thing. Like, do you know every note you have to play? And you know it so well that, again, you can't get it wrong. And if you know your job, when you get on the stage and you feel a little bit nervous or whatever, maybe some people even shake. And when you shake, you don't play well when you shake. Your hands kind of stiffen up on you and stuff like that, right? And if you got that nervousness and you feel it coming on, whatever, just say to yourself and start doing this, because everything is psychological here that we're talking about. So you can psych yourself out to be afraid, but you can also psych yourself out to not be afraid. Meaning saying, I know my job. I got nothing to be nervous about. I know my job. And if you have to tell yourself that in your head a few times, do it. again, for me, it was never about being nervous. For me, it was always about being too hyper. Okay, let's do this, and then playing way too fast, acoustic or electric or whatever. So again, count yourself in, breathe, set up everything that has to be set up, mic level, whatever, mic height, whatever. Be comfortable and don't worry about pleasing people. Is that mic good? Oh yeah, it's good, good. No, no. If it's not good, say, oh no, I think I need to, be nice, of course. Say, I think I need to. It's a little too high for me. Okay, yeah. Most of them. Okay, yeah. No, there. Yeah, perfect. You tell me because they don't know, right? They'll set the mic wherever wherever you tell them. And a lot of times say, okay, well, no, I'll just adjust it myself. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. You know, um, yeah. So there's that. I always found like jam nights or open stage to be more stressing than the actual gig because the actual gig it's like okay it takes you about 3 songs to get kind of really relaxed on stage typically, right? Now when you have the like a 3 hours, like 3 sets in it, like say like a bar or a 2 hour set or whatever you're gonna do, and you go and you play. A lot of times it's like okay, well you get on the stage you sort out the sound. Maybe you get a bit of a sound check before you go on the stage, and everything's good. And then you just play the whole night. And okay, maybe after the third song, you're like, okay, yeah, I think you need a little more bottom end, and the PA or the vocals aren't loud enough, or the guitar's not loud enough, or too loud, or whatever. Okay, yeah, just do a little quick tweak on that, and then you're back into the show, and then you play the rest of the night, and everybody loves it, right? So the stage presence thing is a part of your what I call alter ego. Well, everybody knows what an alter ego is, but like there's the person you are, on the floor of the bar, and there's the person you are on the stage, right? You're a different person when you're on stage, and you have to recognize what makes you different there than like than in regular life type of thing. And the thing is that you have a potential to captivate your audience. So they could, if it's a bar, with a bar, it's hit and miss. With a bar, it's basically they are sitting there. They may or may not choose to listen to you, or like pay, full attention to you. So they might be listening to you in the background, but they might be like conversing with their friends or whatever, or they might be sitting there stuffing their faces with a steak or something like that. So you can get a whole arraignment, or they could be just sitting there sipping their beer, staring right at you, right? So there's a whole arraignment of audience that you could potentially have. So the idea is that like a musician's dream is to I think it was like Billy Sheen said it. It was I'd love to play a night where not a single person looked like they were bored for a second. Because even your hardest fan will kind of like look around and kind of tune out for a little bit on a 2 hour concert, right? It's a long time to hold somebody's attention. So you have to be quite extraordinary to hold somebody's attention for 2 hours, right? Now, if we're talking like a hall or a stadium or something that's a bit bigger than your average bar, like I say, we played one night. It was like 5,000 people in this building, and it was cool to see a sea of people like that. It really was. And boy, but are you ever on the spot? Because you basically, yeah, you got people mingling and whatever in the audience and stuff like that, but you have a lot of people that are just basically like a bunch of penguins facing the sun, only you're the sun. You know what I mean? Like they're watching you, so you got to give them something. You can't just stand there and play. I mean, you can, and a lot of guys do, and it's like, okay, yeah, they played well. They sounded good, but they didn't do anything really cool. You know what I mean? So like for example, I remember seeing Pearl Jam, and one guitar player still uses a cable on stage in the age of wirelessness. One of the guitar players, he had an SG, and he was playing, uh, and him and the other guitar player, and I think Eddie Vedder himself, they were all playing guitars at the same time. I don't know if the bass player did this too, but the three of them anyway did this kind of jump in the air spin thing, right? And you see the cable going flying, you see the guitar whipping around, you see them whipping around, and they all kind of jump and do this spin thing at the same time and land at roughly the same time. And it's perfectly synchronized, and it's really, really cool. When you see them do it, it's like, it's like, now that's showmanship. You know what I mean? And little thing, I'm not saying you have to do that, like watching, I've seen Steve Vai whip guitars around his neck and stuff like that. Like with Steve Vai, he had the Hart guitar that I think that got stolen on him, poor guy. I mean, it's not like he can't afford to have another one built, but still, but that Hart triple necked Hart guitar that he had, the thing was really bizarre. I remember seeing it, and it comes down from the ceiling and on a cable, and then he grabs it and he starts playing it, right? And I mean, like, it's really cool. Like, I saw Steve Vai with Whitesnake, and it was just as Passion and Warfare came out too. So he did some of the Passion and Warfare stuff. He did For the Love of God, and what was the other one? But anyway, he did a bunch of really cool stuff. And again, watching him, like the theatrics of, like his costume, he had like this mirror gem guitar with all these little mirrors on it. It was really, really cool. And then he had the Hart guitar. So, I mean, it just becomes a show in itself. And the thing is, he's walking around the stage, and every now and then he grabs the guitar and, flings it around his neck and stuff like that. It's really, really, really cool. So that's to the extreme. Of course, most people wouldn't do that, because if they did and the guitar went flying, that's it for the show. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the only guitar they brought, right? And you can get that kind of performance, sometimes, right? But you don't always have to go to that extreme to put on a good performance. Sometimes just, like, again, rocking out like Angus Young, that's good enough if you have the stamina to do that. Other things is, even if you're not like really animated in your playing, like say you're a folk singer or something like that, you're usually not going to be jumping around that much, but you might do a lot of like interactions with the audience, and that's a big one. I tend to interact with the audience quite a bit, and sometimes you get hecklers and stuff like that. I'm gonna have to make a video on hecklers, because I've been heckled quite a bit on stage, to be honest with you. But it's usually in good fun, and if you don't know how to take it, I can see how somebody could stress out and freak out and get upset or whatever. But for me, like, like if I had friends in the audience, they guarantee they're going to heckle me. They're going to yell something at me, like they're just, try to crack me up or whatever, But that's part of the fun too. And a lot of people don't know how to deal with a heckler. Sometimes you get really rude hecklers. That has never really happened to me, but I've seen it happen. Where you get the drunk guy that just yells at the band or whatever, and stuff. I've seen even one guy one time. I can't remember what song the band was playing, but it was going on a bit long, and it was a little like people were there to party, and they were a metal band, like a rock metal band, 80s, 90s rock metal band, but it wasn't like Tuesday's Gone, but it was something along that lines. Great song, but it was just, people were there to party, not there to get depressed. And this guy gets up, a big biker guy gets up on the stage, grabs the mic, play some real fucking music or something along that lines, and he drops the mic on the ground or whatever. The singer, like, I am, brother, this is real music, like, he didn't know what to do, right? Like it was just really, really, really bizarre. And it's like how do you handle that, right? It's like, it can't happen, just let it go, you know what I mean? But it was just like one of those songs that it killed the mood, right? So, and I guess there was an audience member that wasn't too happy about it. So that can happen to you. It is what it is. Handle it however you got to handle it. I find nothing more cringy than like that kind of a heckle, but that happens so rarely, so you don't really have to fear that. The biggest thing that people are fearing is probably, if we're going to get all Freudian here on you, is a rejection. Now, as I said, like the very first gig I played, okay, it sucked. I knew it sucked because my guitar was horribly out of tune when I started playing the song, and the singer, he was just mumbling because he was so afraid, and he forgot half the lyrics, and whatever. And we were out of time and out of tune, or off time and out of tune, and it makes me think of the song from Alice Cooper called the song that didn't rhyme. Yeah, that became that like that it was true. It was true. It was all true. But it was, like in hindsight, I wouldn't have changed it for the world, because that was the first experience. It was a lot of fun. And then, a year later, when we played that Canada Day again, we were like 10 times better than what we were. the year before because we'd played a few other places and for people and friends like that and got a lot more experience. You know, a lot more feedback on what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong, and we worked harder on it and we got better. That said, the first 10, 15 gigs you're going to play is going to be rough. Like if you video it, you'll be like, it's really good, but you still sound like an amateur garage band. You know what I mean? It takes a long when you see somebody on stage that plays. I mean, there is always the natural talent people that it's like their first time they play live and they just play as if they've been on the stage for 10 years. You know what I mean? But it comes back to that question: how well do you know your material? Like I watched a guy last year, first time he ever played live, and he did a song of his own, and he nailed it. Number one, and the lyrics, it was kind of like a folk rap song, if you could put those two categories. So he's playing like fingerstyle guitar, which sounded very folkish, whatever, but he's doing lyrics that are just like blah 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 blah, and it's like no repeating of any lyrics. There was no chorus in this entire song. It goes on for about 4 minutes of just solid lyrics the whole way through and fast, and kind of like as if think like Eminem or something like that kind of pace of lyrics. And he didn't miss a beat. He didn't miss a note. He didn't miss a lyric, and there was no stuttering, nothing. Like he had this song down. I don't think he could get it wrong if he tried. You know what I mean? Like, and it was that good. And of course, the audience just freaked out. They were so engaged with it. I was like clapping. Again, I don't really care much for rap and hip hop, but when something is extremely well done, and you could see the smile on his face when he got off the stage, he was so happy. There was that kid, little on the autistic side or whatever, that I jammed with a few years ago. It was his first time on stage, and I was honored to be up there with him, because like he didn't really know what he was doing and stuff like that, but he did well. He did very well for his first time playing live. And when he got off the stage, like like to see somebody smile like that and have that much, like you could tell he just like like he was really really happy. His uncle was there, and his uncle was proud of him and all that stuff. And we got up there, and it was it's a video on the channel. It was with my SG3. It was the first night I played my SG3 live, and it was called It Was What It Was, Gremlin Stage Jam, Stage Gremlins or something like that. Anyway, it was one of those nights where just like my guitar was like, I didn't realize my guitar tuner since 1995 was set to be tuning to half step down. So because back in the 90s we used to step like the metal band I was in, and it was very common in the 90s, you either did drop D or you did half step down to make your guitar sound heavier, right? And I tuned my guitar to A440, so I thought, and then I get on stage and I'm like a half step down from everybody else. They're like, no, you're like, so I grabbed my tuner and I tuned up again. Okay, ready to go. I play it. It's like it's still a half step down. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I said, let me use your tuner, and I use their tuner, and it's like, okay, well, the tuners can't be that far out. Well, the next day I look at it and I was like, no, you're tuned to A430. I'm like, okay, no, there you go, right, half step down. And anyway, we played, and there was like this weird buzzing on stage. The stage acoustic guitar, jam night guitar that everybody's been using for the past probably 5 or 6 years, finally gets a short in it, and the kids playing it is like the pickups shorting, and it was just bizarre. But the show went on, and it was enjoyable. There wasn't that many people in the audience, but it was still a fun night, and we did some sort of a Pink Floydy type thing and whatever, and then it turned into like an El Toro type thing at the end. It was still a lot of fun, and it was just like, but that's an improvised jam. You just go with the flow, and whatever happens, happens, and sometimes you get some fun stuff happens, right? So I'm just like, whatever. But you could tell the kid was nervous and everything like that. But the drummer, obviously a lot of stage experience. The bass player, or bass player or guitar player. I can't remember if he was playing guitar or bass. Whatever. I think he was playing bass. Anyway, this guy, like, very, 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 very. He's a working musician, so no problem on stage whatsoever. What the heck's his name? Uh, Hungarian guy. Anyway, I've jammed with him twice so far, and it's like when he gets up on stage and he does his thing, like he does originals and everything like that, and he puts on a really good show, and he gets really, really, really hyper when he plays and stuff like that. He gets the audience going and stuff like that. So it's cool to jam with him and stuff like that from time to time. But it gives you an idea that, like, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more relaxed you get at it. And learning to relax on the stage is probably the toughest thing for most people, especially a lot of people have insecurities about playing, in front of people and stuff like that. And the whole advice, well, just picture the audience naked. That might backfire on you, because there could be some really ugly people in the audience. You know what I mean? And then say, well, what if they're picturing you naked? Then it makes it worse, right? So it's like, yeah, we just don't want people screaming, right? So the point is that like, you got to come up with more realistic solutions to if you run into this, because it can happen to anybody. Where, like, sometimes you will get a little bit of a butterfly thing until that first chord plays. You know what I mean? And a lot of it is just the anticipation and psyching yourself out before you go on stage. So you have to have a bit of a mild kind of approach to, yeah, I'm going to be playing tonight. Yeah, I'm excited to do it, but keep it under wraps, right? And just more focus on being prepared to get up there, and occupy your mind with stuff like that. Is my guitar tuned? Again, set up. The sound check, is my amplifier working properly, is whatever you're using, right? My acoustic, is it working properly? Am I bringing a backup? Whatever it is. But yeah, to not psych yourself out before you go on, and that's 90% of it, is people psyching themselves out before they get on stage. And when they get on stage, they're so hyped up that they're nervous, they can barely plug in their guitar. You know what I mean? And at that point, it makes it really, really hard for you. So the other thing is, when you're new to it, don't do really complicated songs until you're comfortable on stage. So keep it, if you have to keep it with the 3-chord rock, keep it with the 3-chord rock. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is, 3-chord songs, whatever. Keep it simple, stupid is a really good philosophy here until you're used to it. So once you've played a little bit, you've played a few shows or a few jam nights, whatever. And jam nights, I find, are the best way to get from point A to point B here, just because, number one, you're only up there for about 15 minutes. So no matter how terrified you might be for 15 minutes, you could handle 15 minutes more than, 3 hours. You know what I mean? Like an hour set, break, hour set, break, which is typically a bar, right? Or 45 minutes, 15-minute break, 45 minutes, depending on what the bar lets you get away with. For me, I'd love to play 2 hours straight, like maybe a little 5-minute break or 10-minute break in between 2 hours, and put on a concert, right? But that's because I like it. That's because I'm into it. That's because when I start playing, I get into it, right? Because I'm more, focusing on playing really well than I am, worrying about what's going to go wrong. Sometimes strings just magically fly off your guitar. You break a string live. This is why I tend to play fixed bridge guitars now more than the Floyd Roses, because there's nothing more panicking than having your E string or your G string or B string or whatever fly off the guitar halfway through the guitar solo, and you got a horribly out of tune guitar, and you got to finish the song with it. I've done that many times, and when the first time you do it, the thing is not to panic. It's like, shut the volume down on your guitar. If you've got a mute for your amp, mute it, or just shut it off really quick. As long as you don't have a lot of stuff to shut off, unplug the guitar, plug in the other guitar, fire things back up, jump in. It happens, right? Don't freak out, don't panic, don't try to retune your guitar right on the spot. Put that guitar away for the night, don't worry about it. Maybe you can get a string change in between the sets. I've done that too, but it's like, okay, you got 15 minutes between sets. Okay, now you got to put new strings on a Floyd Rose guitar, go back on stage, tune it up, just before you get back on there, and stretch the strings enough so that you can make the rest of the set without the guitar detuning because the strings are still stretching. And you know what? The strings still stretch. You've panicked yourself into trying to pressure yourself into getting that guitar up and running when you should just finish the night with the other one or two backup guitars. If you have 3 guitars, you should be able to do a whole night. But let me tell you a story about one of my the last band I was in, the guitar player. Very good guitar player. Him and I still talk to this day. The first band he was ever in that played live was with this band Syndicate that I used to be in, and we were pretty good. And he had professional gear. He had a Dimebag Razorback guitar, or not Razorback, but the MT guitar when they first started doing those with the Deans. I think he still has it too. He had his crate half stack there. A rack effects. He had everything, right? And then he had I think like a BC Rich Warlock or something like that, and a couple other guitars. And he was so nervous the first time we played live that he broke a string on all 3 guitars within the first 3 songs. And he ended up finishing the show with my second backup guitar. I had no backup guitars left, and I think I even broke a string that night too, come to think of it. It was just one of those nights. It was a good night, it was a fun night, but it was just like, I broke a string on my Hammer Diablo, and it was sounding so good that I finished the night off with the Les Paul or whatever, and it still sounded good, but it was just like, but it took him about 8, like the whole first set to kind of relax. The second set he was a lot more mellowed out, and he was fine. And then after that, the second show, I'm like, Mike, are you going to be okay to play tonight? I said, don't worry about it. He goes, oh yeah, I should be okay. And he was a fucking animal. The second show, he was like, he was like basically a clone of Dimebag Darrell at that point. And I'm just like, this is fucking awesome. you know what I mean? So he was hyped up. I was hyped up. The singer, she got hyped up, and the bass player got hyped up, and then we had a hell of a night, you know what I mean? And it was just like, it was really, really fun when everybody was relaxed on stage, right? And for me, I always try to interact with the audience as much as possible, because at the time I was just a guitar player, just the guitar player, right? And what was cool about that is I could just focus on my job. My job was to entertain. And I've always said this, when you're in your room, you're a musician first. When you're in the studio, you're a musician first. When you're writing songs, you're a musician first. But when you're on stage, you are an entertainer first. And if you can kind of put that philosophy, you're the entertainer that's bringing music with you. You could also be an entertainer that brings jokes with you. You could be an entertainer that brings, what do you call it, mime theater with you, whatever it might be. So interpretive theater, so but the thing is, if you learn how to interact with the audience becomes much less scary when you learn how to interact with them, and that is an art form on itself. There are no words to really tell you what to do there, because every audience, A, is different, and B, when you're trying to find something that works with the audience, something that you do, let's say you find, play the guitar behind your head. We'll just use that as an example. And one audience just freaks out about it. The other audience, the second audience, doesn't notice. The third audience doesn't give a shit at all. And then maybe the fourth audience, oh, I've seen that a million times. You know what I mean? You just don't know what you do. So you got to try different things, and sometimes you have to switch it up, right? So if you watch a lot of modern bands, say Nightwish, I'll use them as an example. If you don't know who they are, it doesn't matter. But they put on an awesome stage show. They don't really jump around a lot, but they have a lot of theatrics going on in the background. Another band that seems to do something really cool, a band I really like, is Visions of Atlantis, and they do the pirate theme thing, right? But there's a song they got called Melancholy Angel, and when they play it live, they all start hopping while they're singing the chorus. The guitar player, the bass player, the 2 singers, and obviously the drummer stays put because he can't hop around. But it's cool to watch that. They're 1, 2, 3, and they sing the chorus, and they're all, and I mean, they're really hopping up and down in the air, and it's and she's singing without, it doesn't even, like she's not even losing like breath or anything while she's singing. Very impressive, because it's like, how do you hop and sing with that much clarity without your voice getting, like, you know, bounced around? You know what I mean? And like stuff like that. They do that, and then the audience starts hopping with them, right? So like that's what you call audience connection, stage presence, whatever. And again, there's, like Stevie Ray Vaughan used to do stuff like that. Again, you take like, I've never seen them live, but like, say like Ramstein or Slipknot. I mean, those guys put on some crazy shows. Another band, they were called, not Monolith, that's the name of their song. What are they called? It's a Japanese band. But anyway, was Crossfaith. Even if you're not into the speed power metal stuff, watch these guys control an audience. It's like they get people like right on the ground, and they jump up all at the same time, and it like, I watch them, and their drummer is just absolutely insane. But I'm watching these guys, I'm like, man, I would love to go to that concert, because these guys, like, they're just like, the crowd is in the show, the crowd is a part of the show. You know what I mean? And that's, I guess, a different way to look at it too, is like, you're the entertainer, whatever, sure, but is the crowd a part of your show? Is their audience and participation a part of your show? And if so, sing-alongs, hop-alongs, dance-alongs, slam dancing, mosh pit, or, the wave with lighters. You don't always have to go to the violent stuff, although it is pretty funny. Crowd surfing, that's something I've always loved doing. Like I remember when I saw Pantera, I never heard of them until I saw them live. They opened up for Skid Row, and before Pantera, it was this band called Killer Dwarfs. Now, Russ Dwarf, this guy is like really short. He's like 4'8" at the most, and he's this tiny little guy. He's like Angus Young, he's really tiny and crazy, stupid, hyper. And this guy, when they bring out this song, when the band Killer Dwarfs would come out, the song would start. Okay, the very first song, you'd see this wooden crate it says danger on it, right? And it's like this little wooden crate sitting on right in front of the drums or whatever. And the song, you hear somebody singing, and all of a sudden you see like this arm and leg start kicking out the sides of this crate, and out comes Russ Dwarf. And he comes out on a tricycle, because this guy's tiny, right? So he's like riding around the stage singing heavy metal songs with a tricycle, and then he's like doing headstands and walking on his hands. He's like, rolling on, I've seen him like these guys 4 or 5 times back in the 90s, and they'd be hanging from rafters. Like this guy was, they'd grab him, they'd throw him around like a beach ball. He was just crazy. He'd like swan dive into the audience while singing, and you'd toss him back up onto the stage. It was awesome. And then right after that was Pantera, and the first time I ever heard the song Walk, out comes Dimebag Darrell with that riff, right? And they got him standing on a roadie case, and the roadies are pushing him along while he's like in between the stage and the barrier cage. Back when you used to get close enough that you could high-five the singer, now they're back like 30 feet because people get crushed and stuff. But anyway, he went right by me, and basically I patted him on the shoulder or whatever when he went by, and like he's playing this big fucking D and MT guitar, the lightning bolt guitar. That was my favorite of his. But it was really cool. It was really cool. And then of course, when Skid Row came on, I did some stage diving there. I remember Sebastian Bach saying, "Let's see this guy fucking kill himself off the monitors." I ran. I was wearing cowboy boots at the time, and I did this kind of half-ass kind of somersault into the audience. And when my boots came down, it smacked some poor guy in the head. He didn't die, but I felt bad about it. But anyway, I guess I'm going to leave it at about that. So yeah, stage presence, I mean, you can control your audience. You don't always have to make them do insane stuff like stage diving and whatever, but you can do that and whatever. But the thing is just remember, you know your job. If you know your job, there's no reason to be nervous. So anyway, hopefully that little advice helps. And yeah, there we go. So if you like this kind of content, all links are down below. Thank you so much to everybody who has helped out. And rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day.